Good evening, everyone. Good evening. The lateness is a little bit greatness tonight. We're still, as you can see, we're still kind of getting a few things figured out. I already screwed up right out of the gate. I had did not use StreamYard, so still learning here and there, but we will get a better hang of this as things occur. 9 people in the building already. Yo, you're absolute legends, man. Bless up to all of you. Yeah, love the love, man. So, so as you know, this is certainly long overdue. Been meaning to do this for quite a while now, but I thought no time like the present, especially when I'm about to be welcoming in a new age um, in a few hours' time. So I thought this would be a good start. So, oh, big up to you, Claire. See, look, again, absolute legend. I'm telling you, you're always on point, really and truly. So I guess like before we get started and discuss what we are, what is on the menu for today, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about myself. Because at the end of the day, I am just a schmuck with a microphone and a camera. But to that end, this is something rather like political science, philosophy. This is what I went to school for. It's also what I have done in my professional career and still to this day. um, and and ultimately, like I have, I think one of the massive values like of education, especially at the K-12 level, I'm sure that's as well like in the secondary school level, like education is supposed to help us find our niche in life. Like find out things that we are good at, that we are not good at, and for the things that we are good at, if that is a way that we can figure out how to support oneself, as well as how to ultimately um, as well as just ultimately like not only be able to support oneself, but also be able to contribute back to society in a positive and meaningful way. So from a very early age, I had always known um, I'd always wanted to be in public service. This was something that I had picked up from my grandparents, who were massive community activists in the 50s and 60s in the civil rights era, and ultimately like their life and their experiences had certainly influenced me and had inspired me to seek out that kind of altruistic contribution. Before we get started as well, big up to you, AJ, man, absolute legend. I'm telling you, I'm just truly blessed to have everyone out here this evening. Really and truly, thank you so much for popping in today. Um, so a little bit about so a little bit furthermore. So I went to school for public administration and philosophy, and then I had later went to get my master's degree in public policy. So as you can tell, like uh, I always been very oriented, and I have always been very just invested in the idea of public service. And I know some people may think it's crazy that I had went to school to seek out a career in public service that ultimately is not going to produce many, or I guess as great of economic gains, in say in contrast to like other degrees. But this is something that I love. Like I've always wanted to give back to my community on a micro and a macro scale. So I went to school. It's also why I so like also as well. So while I was in school, I had worked. I worked on Capitol Hill for about a year for two members of Congress, and I currently work for a state government currently, and I love what I do, and I love the contributions that I have made over the last 5 years. I'm certainly proud of it. Um, but to that end, enough waffling about me. Let's talk about why we're here tonight, right? Um, so what the idea is for this channel? Um, there, I mean, ultimately, the world is a little bit on fire right now, and I think probably one of the greatest questions that are being implicitly asked is is why we have a government. No, like why do we have such institutions that exist to represent our collective interests? And as we've seen over time across history, some certainly, like older than myself, and those even younger than myself. We see so many inequities in our society. We see so many issues, and yet they don't seem to be getting resolved anytime soon, which is certainly not great. It's ultimately why there is such anxiety in the world, because the problems that we do face on a very collective scale, they don't seem to be getting any better. And then you ask, and then ultimately people are poised to ask themselves, well, why exactly do we even have government? Why do we have institutions? What is the purpose to all this? So that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about tonight. We're going to be talking a little bit about just like pretty much like the bare essentials. What is politics? Like, why do we have government institutions? Like, what purpose do they serve? And ultimately, like, what is our role as a citizen of a respective country? Like, what role do we have to uphold, to maintain the sense of freedom and the liberties that we do have? So look, so if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. If you want to engage, perfectly fine. If you want to listen in, perfectly fine. Entirely up to your discretion. But just very blessed and very grateful for both, for everyone, each and every one of you legends for being in the chat tonight. Want to give a shout out to Dal, big up Dal. Yeah, no, this is absolutely great. I'm truly lovely, truly blessed. All right, so let's get started. And again, look, we'll have a brief little chat. I'm not sure how long this is going to go on. Just as well. This is a bit of a first time rodeo for me. I've never done anything live or anything relative of this nature. But I definitely got to orient myself a little bit more, like, to StreamYard the next time for the next few times around. So let's talk episode 1, right? What is politics? We know this is a word that is very, very freely used. Also tends to have very ever-changing contexts, right? So from like a macro perspective, from like a larger scale perspective, politics has been used to describe a comprehensive assessment of a nation's actions related to governance. So, for example, like whether a country resembles a top-down hierarchy of power or resembled by branches of government devoted to specific aspects of political administration. From a micro perspective, from a more smaller scale, politics has been used to describe why certain decisions or things that occur either at the workplace or in a legislative arena, why those things, why certain decisions are achieved and get the time of day, as well as things that do not get the time of day. Great. So, for example, again, a lot of the examples that I will use are certainly a bit USian based, but I would also imagine that there is a lot of overlap across a lot of countries far and wide. So for example, we have seen time and again a lot of tax breaks being given to the wealthiest of individuals in a certain country, as well as very profitable corporations. Somehow, economic relief, or assistance is always visible and viable for those groups. However, in contrast, economic relief or improvements to the quality of life for the masses, the working class people of a country, can be few and far between, if not inexistent altogether. And this is that component right there, the lack of addressing inequities in society. That's going to be like a very prevailing topic, like over the course of live streams and the like, because at the end of the day, it really is going to get down to the root of why we have government institutions to begin with, and additionally, why they are currently in dereliction. They're in active contrast of what their original intent was meant to be all along. So, however, at the end of the day, though, politics is, from a legislative perspective, it's making informed decisions as a collective body that establishes the direction, security, and values of a country. And the branch of social science that studies politics and government is referred to as political science. Now, I know that's probably very basic, probably certainly already known, but I did want to I wanted to specify this a little bit more because make no mistake, it is a science. It takes a lot of craft to work together with people who may not see eye to eye on like with you on every issue, to write laws that serve to the altruistic betterment of a society and improving the quality of life en masse. Um, people are going to have varying perspectives and differing opinions, and at the end of the day, not just from like a citizenry perspective, but also from a legislative perspective, it's absolutely critical that that people within our communities that we elect to represent our community interests, that they are taking it upon themselves to do the business of what needs to be done for their community, not for those ultimately who may finance their campaigns. But again, we'll certainly get to that at a much later stage, because be a whole can of worms from there for sure. But ultimately at the end of the day, like it takes such a level of so it's not only proficiency and experience in various fields, both academic and professional, but also posits soft skills, whether it be patience, humility, compassion, and integrity above all else. This like public service is indeed exactly what it entails. Like, it is a service to one's community, micro scale and macro scale. And when we, as use we very loosely, we in a society, when we send our neighbors to these governing bodies to represent our better interests, and that representation doesn't exist, or it becomes so diluted and so not only diluted but also just I guess I'm not thinking of the right word, but I guess like the metaphor would be applying a band-aid to a broken arm. It's not satisfactory enough. When we see the inverse of those values, of the inverse of patience and humility and compassion and integrity and subject matter proficiency, we see rather we have rather when we had the inverse of that, we see that in present day. We see that in governments across the world. And in tandem with the rise of those values, that precipitates a sharp decline in the quality of government. And unfortunately, it creates a slippery slope, because the most critical piece in a representative democracy are the people that it serves. And if people at the end of the day lose faith in the system, for whatever reasons may be, some are certainly legitimate, and we will get to that near the tail end of the stream. But when people lose faith in the system, they're going to be less inclined to participate in it. And when people are less than inclined to participate in the system loses its integrity, and ultimately anyone can get into power. That's a problem, because at the end of the day, public service, it's a great value, but as we can see, it's not really meant for everyone. It could be, but unfortunately, people don't really hold those same altruistic values that rather to be of service to others, to be of service to themselves and to their pockets. But as I said, we'll get to that a little later end of the stream tonight. Big up to everyone in the building today. Oh my days! Big up to you, BBK. Blessings, absolute blessings. I'm telling you, love for the love, man, really and truly. All right. So we talked about what politics is, right? I do feel that our discourse perhaps has become so convoluted and so obfuscated with nonsense, simply because politics itself has become so I don't want to say confusing, but I mean, like, but it has become so clouded with information that ultimately, like, if one isn't necessarily invested, like in political discourse, or not invested in, like in doing like subject matter research and the like, it tends to be out of sight, out of mind. We can we'll sort of talk about that as well. But again, I'm done. Gotta stop waffling. All right. So why do government institutions exist? Right. Not necessarily a new age concept. Right. So like that, and if we look across human history, from the earliest civilizations, whether that be in ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, Mesoamerica, and so like from that time, so we're talking roughly what, 5th, 6th century BCE. So from that time up until, say, the Renaissance, that's roughly 2,000-year period. The like conceptually, like governments and hierarchies of power were typically top down, whether in the whether in the form of a monarchy, or an oligarchy defined by nobility or military rule, or just ruled by so like for example, like an oligarchy is ruled by a few, and over time that would tend to be people that are like noble blood, or just amassed wealth, or there would be like a sole monarch, like ruling in a monarchy. And what is interesting though is that despite the fact that despite the fact that ancient Greece had existed, like in the early, well, I mean, this is for a while, but it wasn't until philosophers like Plato and Aristotle and Socrates and Demosthenes, like these folks didn't really come into play until roughly like the 300 BC, maybe 300 400 BC. So I mean, like, so again, like for the overwhelming majority of human history, we've always known um, governments to be that of a monarchy or an oligarchy. And it wasn't necessarily until the 1700s where we had more contemporary philosophers, like Montesquieu and Hobbes and Rousseau, that had seen the works of ancient Greece, and they had identified that as like the most direct path for a post monarchical political system. Um, a lot of this as well. I mean, this is going to go so well in tandem, with the crux, at least like with the issue, like with the United States, simply because the United States, as we know, was a former British colony, and ultimately the reason why the colonists had rebelled against the monarchy, simply because of this one primary phase that we'll also get to later. It's called no taxation without representation. So we'll get to that in a little bit. So why I wanted to provide like this context, of a precursor, is that like for the majority of recorded human history, like representative democracies are not only a very nascent concept, but they're also they're, to an extent, they are a deviance from the norm, a deviance from what we had like known throughout history, to be rather to be both entrenched consolidated power. We had seen it like in the British Empire, we had seen it in the French Empire, we had seen it pretty much like across like all empires across Europe and Asia, like in Central and South America. I mean, like they were like all these empires were for the most part either monarchical or oligarchical. And so when we and like when the thought, like post Renaissance, like when we thought that giving power to people, it is a radical idea in the grand scheme of things. It's a radical idea, and it's also an empowering idea as well. To give power to the people, it's madness. Why would you want to do that? Well, I mean, some political philosophers said, well, we all shouldn't be ruled by some, like singular individual, who may or may not care about the plights and the inequities that people face in their land. Um, and just as well, they're not accountable to anyone except for themselves. And we know, in certain realms. Hey, bless you. Hey, man, bless up, Taryn. You're absolute legend, man. Absolute legend. Look, something like so. So at the end of the day, when we when we had so many regimes that were established in that top down realm, those are the people that were comprised within that power, like whether they were from like a noble house or whether they had amassed wealth through business or trade. They typically weren't crazy about the idea of relinquishing power back, rather not even back to people, but just giving power to people. They didn't want to do that because they wanted to be in control of society and the way that is dictated, just so that they can enshrine themselves into the position that they're in. Like in Rousseau itself, rather like so I would say out of the political philosophers of the 1700s, like Jean-Jacques Rousseau is probably one of the most prominent ones when it came to a representative democracy, and he had suggested that the problems of humanity, they were the byproduct of our political choices, and just as well, such political choices can be improved by a better political system. All in all, it comes back to the point of that when there are things that are lacking in society, when there are things that can be improved and they're not being improved upon, people start to ask questions, and rightfully so. They're seeing, oh wow, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. We can like, for example, something as basic as as hunger or homelessness, right? These are things that, for the most part, you would think would garner universal support to resolve. So why isn't it resolved? We'll get to that. But we have to, we have to talk about these things, because at the end of the day, it's not just myself that's asking questions. It's people across the political spectrum. It's pretty much regardless of the ideology you support. Because at the end of the day, people are asking this. People are experiencing the same issues, and people are asking the same questions. They may be coming to different answers, but they're asking the same things. So to that end, what purpose do government institutions have? Or rather, what purpose are they supposed to serve in our life? So as we discussed, the original forms of government to emerge, monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy, they were products of differing levels of inequity in society. And why I think the American USian perspective is such a great example is simply because it encapsulated just that. So we can look back at the American Revolution in the late 1700s. We had American colonists. They were subjects of a monarchy, and they had lamented a lack of representation in London despite paying taxes to the crown. There was a period of time in between, say, the French and Indian War and the signing of the Declaration of Independence, that there were certain tax increases by the crown. Excuse me, something just fell under my seat there. Sorry, my apologies. Bit of a technical difficulty there, lads. All right, we'll square that away. So, for example, there were the Stamp Act. There were the Townshend Acts. There were a lot of import taxes that the crown was applying to the colonists, and the colonists they did have a representative in London, but it was just more so for show. I apologize, Claire. This is not my intent. I'm not trying to lecture anyone. Just trying to have a nice peaceful chat. I do apologize. Maybe got to work on my tone a little bit more, but get some good feedback. Thank you. So to that end, so that lack of representation in London, alongside the fact that colonists were paying taxes above and all else, there was clamors there was clamorous for a desire to want to have independence, to be able to self-govern. And well, I mean, we had seen like what had occurred in the revolution. It was ultimately like what had like it was ultimately why we had like rebelled. No taxation without representation. We had also seen it in France, that there was a country of such lavish wealth as well as such dire poverty, and simultaneously, like the monarchy, the aristocracy at that time didn't give a shit. Pardon my French, but ultimately, in the more polite terms, Marie Antoinette said, "Let them eat cake." Ultimately, saying, GFY. No one cares about your poverty. We're doing fine in Versailles. And over time, like that had matriculated into a lot of decolonialization. It like we had over the years, whether it was like the Ottoman Empire, like being broken up after the First World War, whether it was the British Empire being broken up, like over the course of say like 150 some odd years, and we are, like at where we are today to an extent, where where we're here like in this country, and for a large period of time we had a very representative democracy where government was operating as it was intended to operate, that that is working for the altruistic betterment of its people, and ultimately creating a society, creating a world that people wanted to live in. But in the US, we also know that there were certain caveats to that, because when this country was formed, it was formed with the institution of slavery. Um, the slave like enslavement, shall we say, just entirely based off of skin complexion, and this long held taxonomical belief, that the qualities of people had differed based off of skin complexion. This is back from like Carl Linnaeus, like taxonomical derivations. So, but to that end, slightly getting off topic, but ultimately, like, government institutions and government as a whole, at its most base and root form, is to serve its people. It enshrines that government's power enshrines from a representative democracy perspective, that the government's power comes directly from citizens. It's established, to create, rather, an institution is established to create a fair legal system. It's established to maintain domestic peace and order. It is established to provide for the common defense, to promote the well-being of its people, and to secure the freedoms and liberties in the future of current and future generations. And over time, then look, I mean, the United States has had a lot of flaws that it has had to deal with, and it still is. I don't want to get too much in the weeds now. This stream was entirely meant to be as superficial as possible, but there are a lot of there's a whole lot of minutia, no shadow of a doubt. But we will get there. We definitely will get there. So I guess at the end of the I guess that maybe kind of tie things a little bit together. Like, what role of civic responsibility do we, as a citizen of our respective nations, right? I know that some here are from the U.S., some that aren't. Again, bless up to you all. Again, like spending some time this evening with me, absolute pleasure. I mean, like, really, and I'm just ever so grateful. What role of responsibility in our society do we are we tasked to uphold? Because I think at the end of the day, like a government, a representative democracy, for that matter, like is an extent a living and breathing thing. Like it's like a plant. Like it requires nurture, it requires attention, and it requires integrity to what exists. Not not too long ago, there was a period of time in American history where we had something called the middle class. Now, I know that for some folks, this may be a bit of a novel concept, just because middle class. What the hell does that mean? I mean, the American middle class um, was the byproduct ultimately of the Second World War, and it had created economic security. And that right there is such a pivotal concept that has been so lost over time. And economic security, so mind you, so I guess like a little primer. So so as we know, in the 1920s, America had the Great Depression. There was it was a massive economic depression. There were shanty towns left and right. People were out of work. It was a very dire time. And this was also just relatively on the cusp of the Second World War occurring. And the president at the time, rather who was elected I think so. FDR he was elected in 1932, and he was the only president so far. Well, I say so far because we don't know what the hell's going to go on in the future. But he's been the only president to have served 4 terms, and it was and ultimately tail end. It was why the U.S. Congress had passed an amendment to ensure that presidents could only serve 2 terms maximum. But FDR, what he was most notably known for was ultimately creating creating the foundation for an American middle class. Rather the concept of being able to work one job full time and being able to not only being able to make ends meet, but being able to support a family. It's why, for example, there were so many households from say like I guess you can say like World War II, or rather even like post World War II, up until like the 70s or 80s. Like the policies like from that era, they were established to create a society worth living in, especially because like America, they were like, it was coming like right off of the heels of staving off Nazism and fascism in the world. And as a result, when all the American soldiers that were coming home originally from say like 90 from some like so the Second World War ended in August of 1945. For about like the first year or so, there was a lot of unemployment. There was a lot of economic anxiety, simply because all the soldiers came back from the war, but they had no job to go back to. So what happened? There was this massive jobs bill. There was this massive investment in the country. Like President Eisenhower, so he was elected in 1952. Like he had established this bill called the National Highway Infrastructure Bill that ultimately built America's highway system that we have presently today. Put millions of people to work. But again, I'm certainly straying a little bit off topic, but ultimately, the point of what I'm trying to say is that that government at that time, they were more receptive. They were more present with the shortcomings in society and the issues that people were facing. And that's not, and I do want to be clear, the issues that were being held, I guess like the economic issues that were being addressed in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, unfortunately, they were being addressed in a very segregated fashion, because at that time as well, we were still facing discrimination and segregation based off of skin complexion. Like Jim Crow was still a thing, and ultimately the economic gains between say white America and non-white America paled in comparison. But to that end, as I said, slightly getting off topic. So again, like, what role of civic responsibility do we have as citizens to uphold to our nation? And probably one of my most favorite quotes by Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson, he was a founding father of the United States. He had did he write? Well, he was one of the framers of the Constitution. And one of my most favorite quotes that he had described was that a representative democracy can only thrive and it can only exist and thrive dependent on educated citizenry, where we're basically an educated populace being a vital requisite to the continuity of a democracy and to the continuity of our survival as free people, being able to be being able to have such freedom and liberty, things that did not exist in a monarchy or in any authoritarian type of government. However, this is where things get a bit tricky, and this is where things were where we kind of are now in the U.S. as well as across the world for that matter. Because mind you, a lot of the issues that we face, they're not just exclusive to one area in the world. If the citizens lose faith in the political system, right, for whatever reason it may be, the most common reason is that the political system continues to fail to address the inequities in society. People become more desperate. People become more willing to support anything and anyone for that matter, so long as they have the belief held that their lives will be improved as a result. So for example, ever since 1973, like 1973, rather like the 70s and the 80s, those have always been a great inflection point in time. So there are various economic indicators that we can look at, whether it be wages, productivity, inflation, cost of living. We have seen over time that wages have significantly increased. Productivity has significantly increased. Cost of living has significantly increased. CEO executive pay has significantly increased. All these economic indicators have increased over time. The only thing that has not increased over time is wages. Wages have relatively remained stagnant for the last 50 years. Yet everything else in our society, whether it be the cost of goods that we purchase at the grocery store, whether it be our cost of living, whether it be to pay rent, to pay a mortgage, whether it be just to buy like various items, whether it be like a car or rather like a personal vehicle, all these goods have increased over time exponentially. The only thing that has not increased exponentially, or at least has not been even tied to the hip, is wages. So when people talk about, oh well, everything is becoming more expensive, understandably, everything is people are not able to enjoy life as much because now people are working multiple jobs to make ends meet, and even when they're still working multiple jobs, sometimes they're still not making ends meet. I could not tell you there. So mind you, like America's two largest private employers, Walmart and Amazon, there are employees who work in these roles, who work full time, and they're still applying for government benefits simply because the wages that they're not receiving from these companies are being able to support themselves. So what I find, what's so fascinating is that just as well, like these companies, they also get subsidies from the government. They get handouts and tax breaks, whether it be like a nice like cushy little package, or deregulation of the sort. They're getting carte blanche for whatever they want. But ultimately, like their employees, like part of the social contract of an employer-employee relationship is that the employer is paying an employee a living wage, so that when they go home to their community, they're able to contribute to the American economy, purchase goods. The American economy, by the way, 70% of it is driven by consumer spending. So when we talk about the most common consumer in our society, we're talking about someone who's a working class individual, works a full-time job, probably even a parent for that matter. They have less scope and capability to purchase not only the most basic things in our society, but they're also not able to advance and develop economic security. They're living paycheck to paycheck. And that over time, it creates anxiety, it creates pressure and stress that could be so easily avoided. So when we talk about like what role do we have as a citizen to our country, like I think that the most fundamental role is to be civically engaged. It is to ensure that that the people that we elect to government are representing our best and collective interests. Because otherwise, what the hell is this all for? Seriously, like if we're not doing it, if we're not doing the most basic concept of governance, why do we even have a government to begin with? And that's a question that a lot of people are starting to ask now, simply because the issues in society are not being fixed. Government continues to exist and not address all the most basic and fundamental issues. And this continues time and time again, year after year. I don't know. Like, I don't know like what at what point it's going to come to a head. But and I understand. I certainly appreciate why people don't vote. As much as I don't agree with it, because rather growing up, as I said, so my grandparents, like they were civil rights activists. They were very civically engaged, and they said like there's a reason why people are trying to restrict your ability to vote and to express yourself. There's a reason why. If people didn't like, if voting wasn't as fundamental and important, people wouldn't be doing it. People would not, and just as well, people also would not be trying to restrict other people's ability to vote. So while I appreciate that on one hand, like people have been so neglected over time, this is how communities have been neglected over time. I mean, like there are communities here in my area in central Pennsylvania. There are communities all across the Rust Belt, from Pennsylvania all the way over to you can say Illinois, even Iowa for that matter, or Wisconsin. This entire region during the 1980s and 90s, it was completely ripped apart by companies who sent jobs overseas because it was cheaper to. Yeah, we went through a whole period of time where we as a society we said, yeah, we want cheap goods, we want them available, we want them ready, and companies were like, okay, bet, we will let go of your job. We will send it over to Japan or Mexico or China, and we'll produce everything that you want. You'll be readily available, but you won't have a job. And there were so many communities over time that were neglected, and they still are neglected. Like Flint, Michigan, probably one of the greatest examples of that. And I say that because my grandparents, like they had raised both my father and my two aunts in Flint, Michigan. Flint, Michigan was probably like a model city in the 1950s. It was a thriving middle class city. It also predominantly because it had a Ford Motors and a General Motors plant in town, and it hired ultimately the majority of the citizens there. And probably one of the most unique aspects of that time is that the executives of these companies, whether it be Ford or GM or supermarket chains and the like, all of these people lived in the same community. They were shopping at the same grocery store. They were going to the same place of worship. They were rather their kids were going to the same schools. It was far more interconnected. But now as you look in the 21st century, more so over the last 10, 15 years, like people of greater amassed wealth, they have become more distant. They have become more exclusive in their own little niche communities. And it's ultimately why we have such a K-shaped economy at the moment. I mean, the K-shaped economy has been existing for quite some time, but the reason, and what I mean by K-shaped economy is that, like, so when you look at the letter K, right? So there is a deviance of outcome. So on one hand, like the top part of the letter K, They're having a great time right now. They're experiencing all the economic gains, that are being discussed. But the bottom half of that K-shaped economy, where a lot of the working class people exist, they are not experiencing the same gains and results as that. And that's ultimately why there is such a disconnect in our in our country, not just in the U.S., across the world. It's why there's such a disconnect between the working class people and just the masses and the government that are supposed to represent the masses. So, I mean, there is a bit of a chicken and egg situation here. How do you convince people, that they should still exert their inherent civic duty to be engaged, to show up to vote, despite the fact that doing just that has proven to not do anything, or has proven to be so minimal as a result. Flip side, though, if people don't vote, we end up typically electing some of the worst people to ever exist in our society. We end up electing people who do not share the same working class values, who do not share the same beliefs and perspectives of how a society should be configured. And it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that sense. And that's partially why I believe that that the people who are running for office today, they just don't they either just don't get it, or they're just not speaking to those values. So I mean, I live in a very politically balanced area, balanced in the sense that it's not leaning towards one ideology or the other, in an aggressive manner. It gets very much in the center. And a lot of working class people here, a lot of really nice people here as well. But simultaneously, because they have been because their economic outlooks and their futures have been ignored over time, they keep on voting, but nothing's changing. And just as well, people aren't incentivized to vote outside of the fact that that it is a bit inherent. It's implicit that they should be voting. I know I'm rambling a little bit. Again, I do apologize. This is my first time doing this. I'll get some things figured out. But to that end, it is a bit of that chicken and egg situation. How do we incentivize and encourage people to exercise their right and duty as a citizen, to go out and vote? And just as well, candidates who do run for office, they're not entitled to votes. They need to earn them. They need to be going door to door. They need to be engaging and interacting with their neighbors, who ultimately they are going to be serving in a governing body. So again, I said I don't want to get too much in the weeds tonight. I just wanted this to be as superficial as possible, but just to kind of give an idea of what this channel is going to be about. We're going to be talking a lot about the political structures of things. We're going to be talking about how things have developed and established over time. Because mind you, things just don't occur yesterday or instantaneously. Things matriculate. Things occur over a deep period of time. It's unfortunate, and just as well, I'm turning 33 tomorrow. All right. There are people who are far more wise, far more experienced than I am. And they're also just far more, I don't want to diminish myself. I do have experience in things, but I understand that, that someone who's maybe say 40 or 50, they do have, they've just been around in this world a little bit longer than I have. And that's fine. But you would think that as they say, with age comes wisdom, and you would think that you think that people who have been here longer on this earth than I have, who have also experienced the world before it has gotten so not only so divisive, but it has become so segregated. Not just off of skin complexion, but more so now off of class. There's a massive class segregation occurring, and like what I find so disappointing is that is that people are not speaking a little bit enough about this truth to power. Claire, don't ever apologize for interrupting. No, not at all. No, so I have not run for office. However, with that being and that's very kind and considerate of you. For you to say. What I can say is that like I have always sought to run for political office. Like it's why when I was in senior year of high school, so we're talking geez Louise, we're talking 2011, right? Long time ago. Feels like eons. I was living in Florida, and we had a governor at that time who was just recently elected. He had and in his first proposed budget, he had asked for all budget cuts, so basically austerity across the board, except for two areas, for two departments, if you will. The first was the Florida State Police, and the second was the Office of the Governor. So basically, he was asking for cuts across the board from agriculture all the way down to education, all the way down to Veterans Affairs, across the board budget cuts, except for the state police and for his own personal gubernatorial office. And this was also, mind you, this is also on the cusp of having by far potentially one of the most incompetent governments at that time, the George Bush administration, where we had basically occupied Iraq and Afghanistan as an effort to go after Osama bin Laden, who was neither Iraqi nor Afghani. And we had spent not only trillions of dollars on that, but we had also sent a lot of brave young men and women, overseas, and some of them did not come back home, and a lot of them who had come back with a lot of health ailments. And ironically enough, this is very, very status quo for this country. Like we love sending kids, and we love sending people to war, but when they come back home, no one gives a damn. No one gives a damn at that point. No one gives a damn about them reintegrating back into society. No one gives a damn about them having the necessary healthcare coverage to be able to support the ailments that they had occurred over in Iraq and Afghanistan. So, for example, there was this massive thing with burn pits, and there were toxic burn pits, and ultimately, as a result of the fumes from these burn pits, soldiers they were inhaling that, and it had caused respiratory issues in their body, and ultimately, I think even still to this day, the Veterans Affairs administration does not consider toxic burn pits to be a viable and a viable medical condition. So again, I do apologize. So, but ultimately, there was so much incompetence that I had seen over time growing up, from adults, mind you. Again, these people, these adults are far more experienced, far more exposure in life than I had just by virtue of age, and I'm saying to myself, if these idiots can do this, if these idiots are actually able to find their way into a place of governing power that's dictating the role in society, but yet they're not capable or competent to do so, then pretty much anyone can. I had not only used I not only referred to my grandparents' life and accomplishments as a way to incentivize my own path for public service, but just by default of seeing people who were so wildly unqualified in these roles, I thought was the greatest inspiration that I could ever have. And a former president like Barack Obama said, be the change you wish to be in the world. I want to be of service to others. It's why I went to school. like for what I had. I went to school for for public administration and philosophy, and I went to get my master's degree in public policy. Like, I always knew I wanted to give back to society, because at the end of the day, especially as time progresses, like people, like, we need our best and brightest in there. Am I the best and brightest? I don't know. I mean, again, at the end of the day, I am just a schmuck with a mic and a camera and opinion. But I have also invested my time, like, in public service, like, specifically just for the altruistic betterment of creating a world that we all want to live in. And I think what's so frustrating, Claire, and again, I'm rambling. I really need to work this up a little bit better. Like, what drives me crazy is that there are so many socioeconomic inequities that exist that could be resolved if we wanted to. We could do it. We could do it today if we wanted to, but simply because there's a lack of willpower, not just from people who are elected, but also just from the collective masses. We're all saying generally the same thing, that we want a better life to live, that we want to live with some economic security, that we're not living like paycheck to paycheck, that we're also not that we're not weighing up if we're going to be skipping out on meals in order to pay utility bills. Like, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, it's absolute madness to consider that something like that is even existing. And it's frustrating just because it can be remedied, it can be addressed, but the people in power have no interest in it because they are the ones that are benefiting from it. So ultimately, at the end of the day, like, I this channel was so I guess just rewind a little bit. So the reason why I haven't been able to officially announce my run for office is because of the job that I have. So I currently work in state government. I have been a data analyst and system administrator for the immunization registry in Pennsylvania now for the last 5 years. I love what I do. I mean, I take such pleasure and pride in what I do because I can directly see the contributions I make, not only internally with my team, but also externally for 13 million people here in the state. Like, I can see like the results of my work. I can see the results of my work, like on a day-to-day basis. And I know it's a thankless job, and that's fine. Like, I mean, like, I know that, like, public service as a whole, it just needs to be done. Like, it is intrinsic, like, it's necessary that, that the issues that we have in society need to be addressed, because otherwise we have such societal tension. We, and that things seem so broken. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, like, I just, like, look, at the end of the day, like, I know that, like, I came from, like, a very, like, middle class, like, background. Like, my father was a teacher. My mother was an immigrant from the Soviet Union, and at the end of the day, like, I think above all else, and I do want to kind of wrap this up as well, because I'm very grateful for all your time, but I certainly don't want it to, like, take up all your evening. Absolute legends. I really and truly, I can't tell you how grateful I am for all your time this evening. But at the end, I think I want to wrap up and say that, there are so many things that unite us more than what divides us, and there are people who will always try to instigate the divisions between people, as superficial as they may be. But at the end of the day, it is critical as a mass to be able to come together to a unified message that we all wish to live in peace. We all wish to have economic security, to be able to not only support oneself, but to also be able to support a family, to also be able to give those children a better life than we ever had growing up, and to be able to ensure that promise for generations to come. That value has been lost over time, and I think that's definitely what drives me most in public service. Like, it's to give back and to create a world that we all wish to live in. Yeah, but yeah. So I said, I have to say, this was a bit ad hoc. This also was a bit like on the fly as well. I certainly wasn't expecting to even go an hour, for that matter. I mean, like, oh my days. So what I can say with the future of this channel, as of right now, I still work for the state. So the only reason why I haven't fully announced, or I've not been able to officially announce running for office is because I hold the job that I do. There's a certain law, a federal law in the U.S. Called the Hatch Act, and ultimately because I am a government employee, like a civil service, I'm not able to run for public service. For an elected office. So I'm still trying to find a job. Ironically enough, like, it's not the fact that I don't have a job; it's the fact that I do have one. It's the type of job that I do. I'm still trying to get that squared away. As demoralizing and frustrating as it is. But to that end, as far as this channel is concerned, I would like to do something like this on a more reoccurring basis. I also maybe would like to get like some folks on as well to have a little panel, and to talk a little more about like the societal inequities that people face. I think it's important for people to hear what other people have to say as far as like what again, what stresses them out most at night. Whether being the present or just in the future. I'm still a single individual. I think I've always intended the idea to have a family one day, but can't tell you how much it scares me to bring in children into this world now, let alone being able to provide them a future and a childhood that better than what I had, but to be able to provide a future that I can rest comfortably knowing that their lives are not going to be cut short, or limited by the lack of action that we are taking today. So it's all directly interrelated. So ultimately, I'm hoping to do this maybe like once a week. I also would like to squeeze in like a few like specific maybe like uploaded videos like regarding like a certain like policy area and the like, because I'm telling you, like, I can talk your ears off for policy for hours, but I certainly don't want to tonight. So this has been great. Again, and as you can probably hear, like, this is maybe still a little bit uncomfortable for me. Public speaking, it really isn't my greatest. But I do appreciate, like, everyone, like, popping in, showing some love, and just making this a very comfortable space. And this is ultimately like what I want. I want this to be like a very, intellectually curious and comfortable space for everyone to be able to, for people to speak their minds and have like a meeting of the minds, for that matter. Again, I don't expect everyone to be able to agree or disagree. Rather, I don't expect everyone to agree on everything, which is fine and it's natural. But I think we should be able to express ourselves coherently and be able to view contrasting opinions. So on that note, oh, Claire, you're an absolute legend. Across the seas, really and truly. No, and thank you, Zoe, for the birthday wishes. Really, this year has just gone by incredibly quickly, and yeah, damn, 33. Oh my days, I'm telling you, time's just flying right before my eyes. So thank you, and it's interesting. Thanks to your new things. No, thank you, and I appreciate that. And I really appreciate that intellectual curiosity. That's something that I certainly want to cultivate here on this channel, and and again, I very very grateful for all your time this evening, Claire. So I just want to give like a few other shout outs before we round up here. Shout out to Taryn, absolute legend. Shout out to Dal, AJ. Yeah, just Waffle Don as well. Big up to you, Abs. Yeah, no, just absolute love. So to that end, we're just slightly over an hour. This I'm also going to do StreamYard as well, because mind you, like, so for some reason I thought that I'd be able to do a virtual background through YouTube, but alas, I was proven wrong. So I'll get that squared away next time around. But no, this has been great. So on that note, thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. Claire, thank you again for all your time. And thank you everyone as well for stopping in, showing some love. Guys are legends. All right. But no, hopefully we can do this again sometime soon. I hope to do this maybe like rather like a once a week thing. Try to do like some uploads in between then. But until then, stay safe, stay blessed, and Stay in solidarity. You know, like all we have is each other, and the only people that are going to be saving ourselves is ourselves. On that note, nighty night. Bless up.